Plato's warning. Why democracy terrified history's greatest philosopher. Picture this. It's 399 BC. The world's most brilliant philosopher, Socrates, is about to be executed. His crime? Corrupting the youth and questioning the gods. But here's the twist. He wasn't killed by a tyrant or a king. He was killed by democracy. His student Plato watched in horror as the Athenian people, the very people who invented democracy, voted to murder the wisest man who ever lived. And that moment changed everything. What if I told you that 2,400 years ago, Plato predicted exactly what's happening in our world today? The rise of demagogues, the manipulation of uninformed masses, the collapse of truth itself. He didn't just predict it, he warned us how to stop it. This is the story of why democracy terrified history's greatest philosopher, and why his solution might be the key to saving our civilization. To understand Plato's critique of democracy, you need to understand the trauma that shaped his entire worldview. Imagine watching your mentor, the man you considered the wisest person alive, being sentenced to death by a mob, not because he was evil, but because he asked uncomfortable questions, because he made people think. The Athenian democracy didn't kill Socrates because he was wrong. They killed him because he was right, and that was inconvenient. Plato looked at this golden age of Athenian democracy and saw something horrifying. A system where truth was determined by popular vote, where the loudest voice won, where wisdom was drowned out by the roar of the crowd. But here's what's brilliant about Plato. He didn't just complain, he diagnosed the disease. In his masterwork, The Republic, Plato identified the fatal flaw in democracy. It assumes all opinions are equal, that a philosopher as understanding of justice is worth the same as a drunk person's opinion at a tavern. But Plato asked the question that democracy can't answer. What if they're not equal? What if some people actually know more than others? What if expertise matters? Plato gave us one of the most powerful political metaphors ever created, the ship of fools. Imagine you're on a ship in a storm. Who do you want steering? The captain who studied navigation for decades, or the passenger who's never seen the ocean but promises everyone free drinks? In democracy, Plato argued, we choose the person promising free drinks every single time. Here's his exact scenario. Picture a ship where the crew has mutinied against the captain. They've never learned navigation, but they're convinced they can steer better than the expert. They fight among themselves for control, each promising the passengers whatever they want to hear. Meanwhile, the real navigator, the one who actually knows the stars, the currents, the weather, is called a stargazer and ignored. Sound familiar? Plato saw this pattern everywhere in Athenian democracy. The skilled orator who could manipulate emotions always defeated the wise person who told difficult truths. The demagogue who promised easy solutions always won against the expert who explained complex realities. But here's where it gets really interesting. Plato wasn't just describing ancient Athens. He was describing human nature itself. Think about our modern world. Climate scientists are ignored while charismatic politicians deny climate change. Economists are dismissed while populists promise economic miracles. Medical experts are contradicted by social media influencers. We're still living on Plato's ship of fools, and the storm is getting worse. Plato identified something that modern psychologists are just beginning to understand. Democracy doesn't just allow manipulation, it incentivizes it. Here's why. In a democracy, the person who wins is the person who can convince the most people to vote for them. Not the person who's right, not the person who's wise, the person who's most persuasive. And what's the easiest way to persuade people? Tell them what they want to hear. Plato watched Athenian demagogues perfect this art. They would promise the people everything: more money, easier lives, victory in war without sacrifice. They would identify enemies to blame for all problems. They would appeal to the lowest common denominator of human nature: fear, greed, and resentment. The masses, Plato observed, are like children. They want candy, not vegetables. They want entertainment, not education. They want simple answers to complex problems. And democracy gives them exactly what they want. But here's the terrifying part. Plato saw that this creates a feedback loop. The more democratic a society becomes, the more it rewards manipulation. The better the manipulators get, the more uninformed the masses become. The more uninformed the masses become, the easier they are to manipulate. It's a death spiral. Look at our world today. We have more information available than ever before, yet we're more polarized than ever. We have more education than ever, yet we're more susceptible to conspiracy theories than ever. Why? Because we've created systems that reward the most compelling lie over the most uncomfortable truth. Social media algorithms don't promote wisdom, they promote engagement. Politicians don't get elected by being right, they get elected by being popular. News outlets don't survive by being accurate, they survive by being watched. Plato predicted all of this. He saw that democracy would evolve into what he called the rule of the mob, a system where truth is whatever the crowd believes, and the crowd believes whatever makes them feel good. So what was Plato's solution? If democracy is doomed to fail, what system could actually work? His answer shocked the ancient world and still shocks people today. Meritocracy led by philosopher kings. Here's his reasoning. We don't let random people perform surgery just because they're popular. We don't let untrained people fly airplanes just because they want to vote. So why do we let people rule societies just because they can win elections? Plato proposed a radical idea. What if leadership was based on wisdom, not popularity? What if rulers were chosen for their knowledge and virtue, not their ability to manipulate crowds? The philosopher king wouldn't be someone who wanted power. Power corrupts. They would be someone who understood truth and was reluctant to rule, taking on leadership only out of duty. But here's the genius of Plato's system. It wasn't just about having wise leaders. It was about creating a society that valued wisdom over popularity. In Plato's ideal republic, children would be educated from birth to value truth over comfort, wisdom over wealth, virtue over victory. They would learn to think critically, to question assumptions, to seek knowledge rather than confirmation of their existing beliefs. The education system would be designed to create citizens who could recognize manipulation and resist it, who could distinguish between expertise and opinion, who could handle complex truths instead of demanding simple lies. Most importantly, Plato's system would have what he called the noble lie, but not the kind of lie we think of today. His noble lie was the truth that expertise matters, that wisdom is real, and that some people genuinely know more than others about how to run a society. Now, before you dismiss Plato as an ancient elitist, consider this. We already live in meritocracies in many areas of life. Your doctor earned their position through years of study and proven competence. Your airline pilot isn't elected by passengers, they're chosen based on skill and knowledge. The question Plato forces us to ask is, why do we accept meritocracy in medicine and aviation but not in governance? What would a modern Platonic system look like? First, it would prioritize education above everything else. Not just information, but wisdom. Not just facts, but the ability to think critically about those facts. Citizens would be trained from childhood to recognize logical fallacies, to understand statistical reasoning, to distinguish between correlation and causation. Second, it would create barriers against manipulation. Just as we have truth in advertising laws, we might have truth in politics laws. Just as we require financial advisors to act in their clients' best interests, we might require political leaders to act in the public's best interest. Third, it would elevate expertise without destroying accountability. Leaders would be chosen based on demonstrated competence, but they would be constantly monitored and evaluated by independent institutions designed to detect corruption and incompetence. But here's the most important part. Plato's system would create a culture that values long-term thinking over short-term gratification, that rewards difficult truths over comfortable lies, that celebrates wisdom over popularity. Imagine a society where the most respected people aren't the richest or most famous, but the wisest and most virtuous, where citizens are educated to think critically instead of emotionally, where leaders are chosen for their ability to solve problems, not their ability to win votes. Plato's warning echoes across 24 centuries. Democracy without wisdom is mob rule. Freedom without education is chaos. Choice without knowledge is manipulation, but his message isn't despair. It's hope. Because buried in his critique is a solution. We don't have to choose between freedom and wisdom. We can have both, but only if we're willing to do the hard work of creating a society that values truth over comfort, expertise over opinion, and long-term wisdom over short-term popularity. The question isn't whether Plato was right about democracy's flaws. Look around you. The question is whether we're brave enough to implement his solutions. Are we willing to create education systems that teach wisdom, not just information? Are we willing to build institutions that reward competence over charisma? Are we willing to be citizens who demand truth from our leaders even when that truth is uncomfortable? The ship of fools is still sailing. The storm is still raging. But we still have time to find our way to shore. The choice is ours. The time is now. What would Plato do?